Give me a moment to just introduce our guest today. We hope in future to have more editions of Living in Dialogue with Nature so that you can get more perspective from different eminent people on this issue. And we also hope that at the end of the day, we all go to have some dialogue with nature. So Professor Darah Gigi Darah is a professor of oral literature and folklore at Delta State University, Abraka, and at the University of Africa at Toru Orua in Bayelsa State in the heart of the Niger Delta. He's executive assistant to the governor of Delta State on Niger Delta affairs. He's chairman Pan-Niger Delta Forum, that is PANDEF, the Delta State chapter. He has been a consultant for UNESCO on the Convention on Intangible Cultural Heritage of Humanity. And he was a consultant to UNDP on the Niger Delta Biodiversity Conservation Project from 2017 to 2019. Professor Darah has written many books, a very long list. We wouldn't like to spend the whole day reading the list of his publications, but some that has caught our attention and which are very relevant to this conversation include Rural Folklore, Sciences, and Global Knowledge Economy, and the Niger Delta Resource Control and the Quest for Justice, Songs and Stories of the Niger Delta Environment, Popular Responses to Conflicts and Disasters. All they speak about nature and how we are related to nature. Gloria Ekpo is a program management and training specialist with over 20 years experience in the field of agricultural extension, agricultural policy development, and analysis. She is an expert on value chain development in agricultural, rural economy, gender, and livelihood development across communities in West and East Africa. She is currently the facilitator of the Agriculture and Food Security Policy Commission of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, NESG. And so we have two of the very best that anyone could hope to have on a program of this nature. And so, Professor, I'm going to come to you. In the introductory remarks I made, I alluded to the fact that one of the major sources of the conflict we're having with nature and the destructive activities of humans, very predatory activities, because we've lost the capacity to actually talk with nature and hear nature. So can you tell us, is it possible to have a dialogue with nature, or have we lost it completely?
Well, thank you, Nimo. We appreciate the effort you have made in putting this dialogue together. Of course, you have been our teacher for a long time on these issues. And we are your students. So you can afford to grade our work today, to know how far we have learned from you and dialogue with nature through your work, poetry, activism, politics, law, etc. For a takeoff, I know and I think that it is possible to have dialogue with nature. In fact, from the point of view of cultural experience, I say that we are always in dialogue with nature. The difference is that sometimes, instead of engaging in dialogue of mutual benefit, we engage in warfare with nature. We abuse nature. We alienate nature. We exploit nature. We oppress nature. We try to dominate nature. These words I've chosen help us to understand the relationship that we human beings have with nature. But I would like to go even a little back, again from point of view of culture. I think that it's important to distinguish the human communities and the way they relate to nature. All people in the world do not relate to nature the same way. So environmental, cultural factors determine how we understand, appreciate, relate, befriend nature, or how we think that nature is a central bank of resources which we must plunder, pillage, then make wealth. Make wealth, destroy health. So in that respect, we can say that what you now call capitalist industrial countries tend to be more ruthless in their destruction of nature because their primary objective is to acquire, is to accumulate, and to increase material comfort. In economics, they call it profit motive. So countries that are governed by the religion of money, by the ideology of profit at all times, by the fact that 1% of the population can afford to be affluent, the other 99% should perish. Countries that are run by such ideologies tend to commit more crimes and atrocities against nature. There are also societies in the world, particularly in the so-called third world, Africa, Urobo, where I come from, in Niger Delta, that relate to nature in a respectful way, that see nature as a companion. In this sense, I'm describing human beings as part of nature, not separate from nature. This distinction is important in order to enable us recognize the point, to quote Achebe, where the rain began to beat us. In the society that I grew up in Urobo land, human beings and nature always dialogued. In fact, those pre-capitalist societies recognize nature as the environment, the context, the building, the hall, the theater in which all humans, animals, fishes, trees exist. So it's a chamber of harmony. So for that reason, human beings establish principles. They establish, sometimes it's done in a festival, sometimes it's done by prayer, sometimes it's done by imposing sanctions. Don't enter this forest for the next 3 months. Don't harvest this crop for the next 1 year. All these sanctions are a reflection of the respect that human beings extend to nature. Let me repeat myself, sir. The scholarship, mostly from the Western world, so-called Europe and American world, tend to separate nature and culture. It argues that nature are those original things that develop or evolved. Christians and Muslims will say created by God. Whereas culture are those activities, institutions, arts, carvings, festivals, clothings, buildings, which human beings exploit nature to construct. That definition puts the two of them almost as antagonistic position. I'm returning it to where it belongs, that human beings are part and parcel of nature. In other words, when we commit a crime or when we injure nature in a way that is destructive, we are in fact destroying ourselves. I can see that tone already in Nimobasi's summary, that so many catastrophes, so many disasters are now inflicted on human beings because we are paying the price of wrongs that we did in the past. So for us to benefit, all of us students of this discussion to benefit, let's take the preliminary position that human beings are part and parcel of nature. And if we take it from point of view of physics, of astronomy, we will know that those who say there was a big bang that created universe, that created cosmos, they argue that that happened 30 billion years ago. Then life, which is what we are now defending, evolved gradually, and by about 4 billion, 5 billion years ago, life came into being in various forms in the waters, fishes, animals, stars, humans. Now we are part of that chain. But because we are humans, we tend to pride ourselves as superior. We are superior to lizards. We are superior to ants. But in my compound here, where I plant herbs in imitation of Nimobasi's compound, I find that even the earthworms are so crucial for the growth of my plants. Sometimes we ignore this. In any case, I'm going back to that physics question that life and humans and other living organisms evolve over time from nature. Therefore, we are part of nature, and we must treat it both as our own protector and also our own companion. Once you have this attitude, then we will be more careful in designing the tools and equipment with which we exploit the gift of nature. And if we're exploiting just to make us live well, not to dominate, not to be imperialist, not to be a colonialist, not to be a Boko Haram, not to be a conqueror. If our duty is just to take from nature what is required for our survival and comfort and health, I'm sure the relationship will be more cordial, will be more harmonious, and our future will be better assured than it is now. Maybe I should hang it there.
Thank you very much. That is a wonderful opening. You threw out a lot of things to worry about or to consider. And I mean, I'm struck by the fact you said that humans pride themselves to be better than lizards.
It's arrogance. Arrogance, yes.
That's arrogance, okay.
Yes, yes.
And you really made it very clear that the challenges that humans see themselves as being separate from nature. When we're separate,
strong-headed. Yeah.
The relationship is to dominate, to oppress, alienate, and exploit, always exploit. Now I'm going to ask Gloria Ekpo to step in at this time and give us her thoughts on how humans are related to nature. Are we part of nature, or could we? How come that we think that we are outside of? So Darah mentioned the fact that his garden in his compound, he found that the earthworms are very important for our food production. Do you see this in your own experience? How are we relating to nature? Is it the optimal way, or something has broken?
Okay, thank you, Nemo. And thank you, Professor Darah, for your perspective. You've practically taken everything I wanted to say, but I'll start with an Igbo proverb that says, whoever burns his father's house inherits the ashes. That's very important. And we all belong to the earth. Yeah. And I know that we have a stake in whatever happens in the planet because we only have one earth. And knowing this will help us in building a system that is truly resilient. So there has to be a knowing, a going back to what we used to know, indigenous knowledge in some form, and looking at ways we can tweak our interaction with nature to get back to, so that we will stop having that war that we presently have, because what nature simply does is, we are part of nature and nature is part of us. We are not apart from nature. So
Yeah.
it's very important that we understand this so that we can make peace with nature. Because if we don't do this, in our everything we do, how in our conduct, and not understanding the value natural resources have for us and with us, even in the ways we do things, the way we refuse to reduce, we refuse to recycle, we refuse to reuse things we have, the way we refuse to conserve water, the way we refuse to shop wisely, we just go buying, the way we refuse to plant trees, all we do is we just deforest, we don't care. And the way we refuse, even in agriculture, the way we refuse, and even in our everyday existence, the way we should learn, we refuse to stop sending chemicals to a waterway, and even energy efficiency. There are little things that point us to the fact that whether you like it or not, we are part of nature. It comes from nature. And if we continue this way, we are burning our house, our father's house, which is nature. And what we'll all inherit at the end of the day is ashes. That's my 10 pence for now. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Gloria. We have established so far that humans are part of nature and we cannot really survive if we continue to exploit nature or live separate from it in some of our activities.
Correct. Picture is on it.
So
It looks like
I would like to ask of the specific routes that we have specifically been in agriculture in.
Sorry, we lost you, Joyce. We're not hearing you, so I'm not sure that question can be answered. So while
I didn't hear that.
all right, so
You can repeat it.
Yeah, I'm sure she will reconnect and come back with the question. But meanwhile, can I come to you, Gloria? What can we do to reconnect to nature? If there's been this disruption between us and nature, how can we get back? Is this something to do with our memory? Is this something to do with the way we're living? Is it the kind of culture we have? What is the so-called civilization? What is it that has disconnected us so much from nature?
Thank you. How can we come back? I would not say we have to come back because we're still there, although we are fighting in quote, let me put it in quotes. But there are certain things we ought to learn to begin to redo, to do the way we used to do it before. Number one, our value system is very important, understanding the values of the natural resources we have, and that the fact that it's a gift of God to us, that's very, very important. Because when you don't value something, you will not appreciate what it has for you. Because if you value a system or you value a process, you'll be very careful to ensure that you protect what you have. So that is very, very important. So the sooner we understand, we rejig our value system and begin to have maybe through would I say that many of us have lost out on so many things because many don't have that education. Maybe there's a reorientation that needs to happen for people to understand what is important and why these things are important, why natural resources or why the earth is important to us, and the fact that we have to be sustainable in our practice or in our relationship with earth. That would help us. So our reorientation is very important. Our conduct is very important. And the understanding that we have a system, we have an inheritance that God has given to us. And it's just not just for us in a selfish way to keep it, because we have to act in a sustainable manner because we also have children. It was given to us to hold for a season and to use it well so that we can pass it on to the next generation. So that's very important. So there are other primary or secondary things you can do, like I had said something about planting trees, shopping wisely, conserving water, even in your practice, like in my practice in agriculture, there are certain things I look at. I know there are so many schools of thought about how we can arrive at productivity or we can enhance food security. But there are values that we should look at that would help us better, to help us bring us back to as one with nature. We should look at such things. I know that there's always this debate about um, uh, enhanced productivity, or should I say, yields, and on the other hand, productivity which is sustainable. So there's always that need to have that balance. As much as we're trying to feed a nation, we also have to know that even as we're feeding the nation, there are issues like climate change that we have to deal with. And so these things are there, and we have to be able to look at our interaction with nature from that perspective to see the kind of things we ought to do so that we can reconcile with what we have. That's what I'll say for now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Gloria. And Prof, I'm coming back to you. I know you are in the heart of the Niger Delta right now. When you go, and the rivers and the forests are so heavily, nature is very much challenged in Niger Delta. The Niger Delta has been said to be one of the top 10 most polluted places on planet Earth. So when you go to these rivers and you go to the oil field communities, what comes to your mind? What do you think nature is telling the oil companies, or telling our government and our people? Yes, Prof, I hope you heard my question.
Yeah, you were talking about what nature is communicating to our government.
Yes, when you go to the oil fields, the communities, and see how contaminated the rivers, the forests, the farmlands, and even the air, how they are now. What do you think nature is saying?
Well, nature, is very patient, let me say, but it ought to have pronounced a death sentence on all the governments and companies that have rampaged and ripped Niger Delta for the past 60 years. Maybe it's doing it without our knowing. But from the reports that have been produced, including some done by your era plus your new organization, Friends of the Earth, Niger Delta Environment Survey, United Nations Environment Program, I mean, all the reports incriminate the government of Nigeria and the so-called oil majors. Now, if I want to put it in local warrior parlance, there's no greater witchcraft in this area than the oil companies. So, and it's like the communities are helpless. I mean, you have visited many of them. The report that your organization, Environmental Rights Action, did on the Ijere fire disaster of October 17, 1998, is on my table. I just read it yesterday, when 1,013 women and children were burnt to ashes in that pipeline explosion that happened 22 years ago.
Popularly called the Jesse fire.
Yes, of October 17, 1998, 22 years ago, when the head of state, General Boubacar, came there, he accused the dead people of being responsible for their death.
Yes.
So, how many of those are you going to count? Is it Umwechem? Is it OD? Is it Paramatu? Is it Ogonin that the United Nations have pronounced that it will take 36 years even to purify the water, just the waters in the wells? There's no point now even waiting for them to go and replenish the oil they have sucked away. They've done it for almost 65 years now. And then they are burning the gas. That is indescribable. You know, the records that the average in the OPEC for pollution and gas flaring is 4% of production. Nigeria burns 75% of its own gas. That means Nigeria has set Niger Delta ablaze, deliberately, wickedly. Your book, To Cook a Continent, I think summarizes this experience. I have no formula or recipe on how we can restore the losses suffered by Niger Delta, because there's no part of the world that has suffered that to that level. A process supervised by our own governments. So I know that Latin America, South America, when the Europeans invaded the place some 400 years ago, they killed off Indians and they took off their mines and so on. But the horror is not as atrocious as the one that we have suffered in Niger Delta. But nature has a way of doing self-restoration and inviting us to join. I keep going back to my little village education. I grew up in a suburb village, and from the beginning, in fact, the first day that we were born, the day I was born, I was thrown into the river near the third day you are born, you are thrown into the river. You float, because a baby floats for the first 8 days of his life. We float. That tells you this is your university. This river, this is nature that produced you. You harmonize, you understand, you embrace, you interact, you play games with it, you don't enjoy it. And I had more knowledge of nature through my experience in the wetlands, cooking, trapping birds. And so I had more knowledge than I have even acquired as a professor. Now, that system of nature for self-restoration and self-protection ought to be brought out, not just as policies, but as an integral part of curricula of education. When I was growing up 65 years ago, it was easy. I could stay there in the village. I was contented. Now the children don't stay there. As soon as they are giving birth to, they are doing Okada in Warri or somewhere else. How are we going to reclaim those minds? I'm talking of mind now, because the UNESCO says that all the great wars of the world are first conceived in the mind. And if you want to heal wars and you want to make peace, you should first also heal the mind. So for me, the most important imperative is how to create an educational system that will tell young people, including adults, that they are part of nature. And that nature can be wasted, it can be preserved, and there are ways of preserving. If this education is not done, even when you have a government policy that attempts to do rectification or restoration, that government policy will be ignored. So my advocacy is how to increase self-knowledge of human beings. Gloria was talking about we buy excess things, we go to a shop, and then load our cars with artificial things. All that craze can be controlled. And the philosophical and scientific methods of Africans 5,000, 6,000, 10,000 years ago was related to nature. To harmony with nature. With our Christians now who are miseducated. The festival in Urobo here, it will hold in Ijo Masquerade Festival, or in Oshu Oshogbo, or in the one in Kebbi State. All those festivals that we hold are a way of dialoguing with nature, because nature does not consist of only trees and grass or water. Nature also contains what you call unseen spiritual elements. Those spiritual elements may be the one that fixes studies in physics will reveal to you. After all, there are various types of air, oxygen, hydrogen. We don't see them. They are also part of nature. So a kind of education that will give us a comprehensive understanding of the cosmic harmony that all the institutions, both seen and unseen, live in a common chamber or a common hall. The stars are part of it. The moon is part of it. I've read books saying that if the moon shifts just 1 inch, the earth will also be destroyed. This knowledge is vital for gradual recovery of the damage. We are in the tropical region, thankfully. Things grow fast here because as I teach my students, the tropics is where God has hidden all his wealth, precious wealth. So what concerns us here in Niger Delta concerns the Congo, it concerns the Amazon, it concerns the Indonesia, and the whole belt. So both think globally and act locally. We need an educational curriculum that may be designed or initiated by whomever possible, which we will then advocate and make into laws so that certain aspects of that education that insist that we are part of nature, that we must protect it the way we protect our own property, and that we must relate to it in a manner that is respectful and self-replenishing, so that we don't exhaust it primarily and cause chaos or cause unnecessary. I think we should go. It's a long term, but it will be ultimately more useful than federal government of Nigeria, that is the major beneficiary of this injustice, making a law. They will not implement. They won't carry it out. They will just make the law in Abuja there and then go to Holy Land in either Rome or in Saudi Arabia. I'm saying that the Nigerian human beings, the Africans, are the ones that we should need to re-educate. And their education can be integrated into their formal school system. Those of us who are in folklore and oral literature, we know that informal way of education is effective. When we go to festivals, I was the one 2 weeks ago near my village here. We spent 3 days there. We were related to nature. Flood was needed for that festival to take place. The flood starts in Futajalo Mountain in Guinea. It goes through Mali, Niger, before it comes to Nigeria. That water is needed for the Riviera Nurobo, Riviera Niger, Shekiri, Calabari, all of us who live by the rivers. We need that flood before we can operate, before our fishes can give birth, before we harvest the fishes. So it is very productive and even entertaining to relate to nature and to dialogue with nature. It's the methods that we need to now multiply and put on more attractive formats instead of gun running in our Nollywood films. Instead of shooting guns, maybe we should introduce lessons in nature, give prizes to people who respect nature, give prizes to those who don't use chemicals to kill the soil in order to grow faster corn. Let us glorify, Gloria, let us glorify people who are helping us to relate to nature in a dialectical, friendly, harmonious, and productive way.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you so much, Prof. You said a lot about education in your presentation, and the fact that nature is not just trees and grass and rivers and mountains, is also what the things that we don't see, the elements that are unseen, and they're very much part of the nature around us. And you talked also about recovering mindset. I think our minds have been affected by so many things, by instant news, by social media, by the unfading impact of coloniality, and all the things that simply just disconnect us from what we should be thinking. I will certainly come back to you about that, but let me ask Gloria. Gloria, what do you think? You talk about overconsumption and waste, and that certainly is a big problem. But the way we see the world today, people looking for capital to acquire things. People want to buy whatever is the latest. They want to keep changing clothes, changing devices. It's a fashionable thing to do. So, and people generally also, Nigerians like to show that they can consume. I mean, you go to a hotel or a restaurant or a bar, you find the table flooded with bottles of drinks. And, they want to show how many they could consume in a sitting. I guess maybe it's the same way. I don't know whether it's the same way in their own homes. But I want you to just tell us, how can we, when I say we, I mean the entire world, not just us in Nigeria, how can we get wind away from overconsumption and waste?
Wow. In one perspective, when I was listening to Prof, I had a few wonderful things that I never thought of when it came to celebration of culture. When he talked about they wait for floods for their fishes and stuff like that. Well, we in the agricultural sector, we are trying to avoid floods to make things happen. And we look at it from the aspect of climate change, but that's for another day. For one, when we think about overconsumption, as I had said earlier on, understanding, having a reorientation of what your value system is all about and what is important is very key. Because if you do not have that understanding, there's definitely going to be waste. That is why it looks as if there's overexploitation or over consumption of so many things. So it's very important, as Prof had rightly pointed out, that there has to be a reorientation, an education to know what is key. Because, for example, we realize that Nigeria's forest cover right now is less than 10%, and food production is becoming a problem. And then climate change has resulted, because of the harsh weather, has resulted in floods and droughts and everything. And we also have a culture where we rather depend on imported things rather than looking at what we have locally. So everything really majors on a reorientation of what our value systems is all about, what we think is important. And if we do not have that, we'll continue to waste. We'll continue to consume the way we want to consume. We'll continue to think that for you to have money to buy all these things is good, but not considering the fact that you have to take into consideration what is good for you. Just like the things we take into, we throw into the seas, into the forest, into the land. And our land, the earth reacts. And they react in maybe erosion, it reacts in flooding because we deforest, it reacts in ocean erosion because of the way we have raped it of the mangroves and stuff like that. So if we do not have that reorientation, each time we talk about reorientation and education and vis-a-vis where we are at, when you take into consideration that there's a lot of poverty going on, and people say that they cut the trees because they need fuel wood. If there's no reorientation and giving alternatives to what they have, we're going to continue like this. So that is very important. So that is key. That should be our beginning step, for people to know what is important and understand what exactly our attitude or our lifestyle is the result or the effect of our lifestyle in as it relates to the earth, and it relates to what it gives back to us. So if we don't have that, we can't do anything. So that reorientation, that education is important for us to be able to balance things. So that is very important. So every other thing, whether it's in agriculture, whether it's in oil and gas, whether it's in our cultural attitude towards certain things or our cultural beliefs, if we do not understand the value of what we have, the natural resources, it won't go anywhere. Thank you.
When you say value, I assume you're not talking about financial or monetary value, right?
Definitely not.
Okay. Now, before I go back to Prof, can you just tell us a bit about, in terms of energy, you know, you pass through streets in Nigeria. If I'm going home in the evening, for example, from work, I see buildings with their security lights on. It's not even dark, it's still bright because they don't know when electricity is going to be available. So they never really bother to switch anything off. And so even the little we have, we're wasting. Now, what form of energy do you think would be much more in line with natural limits, even for us in a very energy, in quote, deficient territory?
Okay. Energy comes in different perspectives. When you talk about electricity and you see the waste, it's more because many people, I don't want to use the word they were not taught, or let me say they don't have the culture of when you get out of a room, you switch off a light. It's called conservation. You leave the tap running, you waste water. It's something we should do in our everyday life. But as far as I'm concerned, when I talk about energy, I look at energy from the rural point of view also, in the sense that, look, there's a lot of deforestation going on. And we say, look, don't deforest, don't stop cutting down. And then women tell that, look, this is the only way they can get, this is the fuel they can get for food and everything to build this. And we are not looking at, I don't want to say we are not, because I know that there are initiatives going on right now to look at how we can harness some of the natural resources we have. Like I know that in the office of the vice president now, there's a national expansion on LPG expansion program to see how we can harness what we have, the LPG, to looking at LPG as power. And I'm also, one of the things I'm working with them is to look at the nexus between LPG and agriculture to see how we can alternate, we can do that switch. And there's also the clean cooking solutions to see how they can push LPG as a cooking solution for people in the rural area. But affordability comes to play there. So there are other sources you can look at, like the biomass, looking at making briquettes, because these are things that are very, very possible to do. You can even start a business on it, making briquettes from rice husk and from other things, which provides very, very good flame for your cooking instead of firewood. So that orientation, it still goes down to what you know and what you choose to embrace, and seeing the value in what you have to embrace for you to take that. So energy for me is in that level. There are possibilities of looking at alternatives to harness the alternatives we have, and to educate people to also look at reliable solutions. Because each time we all talk about solar, my brother, solar is very expensive. It's expensive. I don't know why it's expensive here in Nigeria, because it's so inexpensive in places like East Africa. I remember one time I was going to a village, not a village, it's another district called Barara. I was living in Kampala, and I thought, Kai, when I go to Barara, I'm going to a real rural area, no lights, no water. But I was surprised that they had solar panels on their roofs and there was electricity. So that's a likely, and that's a very likely possibility. But is the affordability quotient that we're also talking about here? So if there are ways we can address that natural source, it's a clean source of energy for us. Biomass, using briquettes and the rest of them, using rice husk, using cow dung and the rest, it's better. And then vis-a-vis doing it alongside with ensuring that we have things that we have carbon credits, in the sense that we encourage afforestation or reforestation. Yes, smiling and reforestation is very, very important. That's the angle in which I look at energy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I was smiling when you talk about carbon credits. Well, okay, that we'll talk about that another day. But Prof, I was so intrigued when you talk.
Sorry, I meant carbon sink. Carbon sink, not credit.
Okay. Well, carbon sink, kitchen sink, there are so many sinks. What next can we sink in the economy? Okay, thank you so much for your contribution. And I want to go to Prof now. Prof said when he was born, for the first 8 days, they just threw him into the river and he was floating. And I've heard that from many riverine communities in Nigeria. The babies are just, they're not really thrown as such, they're placed in the river. And of course, they learn, they just feel like they were still in the mother's womb. They feel so much at home floating on the water. And to me, that gives a picture of, something that the communities knew had to be done, a way to bring up the children was part of the culture. And being part of nature was being part of culture. And being culture was part of nature. Everything was so interwoven. So now, Prof, I have many questions to ask you, but we are, I think at the top of the hour, we should be taking some questions from participants, either from Facebook or from on Zoom. But I want to ask this. How can we really define what is a good life? Everybody wants to live a good life. And I want you to just expatiate on, does nature have a role to play in our capacity to attain the good life? When can we say that we're living well, in your opinion?
Well, thank you very much. I was just assimilating some of the points made by Gloria on alternative energy. I'm sure we'll come back to it.
Yes.
No, the definition of good life, I think, is not a static concept. It varies from culture to culture and from era to era. I have read quite substantial material on ancient African civilizations of Egypt and Nubia. And there were classes, there were a hierarchy of people. They defined good life. The Pharaoh was the highest, then other people followed and so on. But they were very genius in the way they related to their challenging environment. That River Nile that supplied the source of that civilization, they tapped it with care. They didn't block it. And for thousands of years, they were able to define and design mathematics for us, design physics for us, architecture for us, medicine for us. All of them originated from that Nile Valley. Good life, whatever way you define it, is not just a full stomach. Because beasts can eat full stomach. Mosquito can have a full stomach. So food is not good life. It is what Professor David Opako, who just passed on 2 weeks ago, Professor of African Traditional Medicine, what he called wellness, not your health. He called it wellness, means you are physically okay, and you are emotionally, ethically, and spiritually also okay. These dimensions I have referred to were known by our so-called uneducated parents. They always took care that the children would eat, but they would not eat excess, or they would not throw away. In fact, some houses throw more food away than what they consume. There was balance. There was control between consumption, which the body needs for biological survival, and the behaviors that would not rupture relationship between humans and nature. Those behaviors, those codes of conduct were not written down. I'm saying they were integrated into the imagination, and there were seasonal celebrations or rites at which they were revisited. Those who have forgotten would be reminded. So a good life is not the driving or ownership of a jeep or somebody who uses the helicopter for his evening walk. That's not a good life. A good life, the way that I was trained in it, in rural economy that I grew up, is that let it be good for you, let it be good for your neighbor. Those were, I'm speaking Yoruba language there now. So the philosophies of coexistence, of shared prosperity. In my own culture here, they call it Agbaro. Agbaro means collectivize your resources in order to grow and survive together. Nigeria, whatever Africa country, we cannot make the right impact in the global civilization if we don't return to some of those fundamental values. Those values, once they are entrenched, they will curb the excesses of capitalist exploiters who want to make money at all costs and then subject nature and the world to disaster. I see some of it in the conduct and behavior of Chinese, Indians, people in the East, what you call the Asia. They didn't sell their souls to Europe. So they talk about their Hinduism, they talk about their Confucian philosophy. They use it to moderate the so-called modern technologies that they have borrowed or taken from other parts of the world. They are still more stable than us. So the fact that we had a wholesale surrender of our cultural values to these marauding capitalists that came from Britain and Europe has made our own defense weaker, and we become more vulnerable to climate change or whatever comes our way. So I am eager that we produce some literature, some information that can help people to recover and redefine what constitutes good life. Not in the ownership of number of houses, not in the ownership of expensive clothes bought from Italy or shoes from Italy, but in self-reliance. And it was, you remember, comrade, it was Julius Nyerere of Tanzania who proclaimed it. He called it Ujamaa, familyhood. Every family survive on a minimum of resources. Let nobody have so much excess as to produce refugees of hunger and so on. If Europeans dismiss it as, oh, that is socialism, I don't mind, but it is useful for us to have an Afrocentric definition of what good life is. If it comes to eating nutritious food, our forests and our soil can produce nutritious food. If it comes to wearing clothes that are harmonious with climate, we have it in Africa here. Let us not, as Shoyinka said, at Europe, by behaving in manners that are inconsistent with the physics and philosophy and spirit of our environment in which we exist. What am I saying? I'm repeating myself that the environment or nature is part of us and we are part of them. And when you stray away, nature will draw you back. If your strain is minor and you can make reparation, you'll be restored back to nature. If you don't make reparation, nature will penalize you. A flood, a hurricane, an earthquake. So good life, let us define its material context. Not just food, but nutritious food. Not pomo, not cowhide. That's not good life. If in danger data here, we can put a ban on cows for 10 years, it won't affect us. Fish, crayfish, crabs, they are all here. They are all nutritious. So we give it material definition and also give it definition of social conduct. If you are a good person, you must conduct yourself in a manner that inspires others to be ethically upright. But if your good life means that soldiers and the police armed are following you, whatever you do is correct, if you go to the court, they strike out your case, that's not good life. Oh, that is barbarism. According to Professor Chik Anta Diop of Senegal, that kind of behavior, excess, me alone, is barbarism. We have to avoid that. So good life is nutritious meals to sustain the body, and then ethical and moral conduct that balances, that does not alienate, that does not make us commit sins and ignore them because we are in power. That education that I advocated earlier will contain sections on this good life, both material good life, spiritual good life, ethical good life, and cultural good life. You must also know the culture of your people. If you don't know them, you don't have good life. You're an alien.
From outer space. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Prof. I was taking notes of your definition of wellness and the components, the physical, emotional, ethical, spiritual, and the fact that we have to define the material content as well as the ethical content. I find from your description that we have a lot of commonalities in African culture about what well living means. We have Ubuntu in South Africa. We have Harembe in Eastern Africa. In my Ibibio language, we call it Etuweb, which simply means good life, good living.
Yeah.
And now I've just learned about Agbaro.
Agbaro,
That you mentioned.
Balanced, equitable living.
Balanced, equitable living. I really have to take note of this. This is lovely. So we need to perhaps have another conversation where we'll examine particularly this Agbaro. How can we attain it? How can
spread
we make
it like a gospel? Yeah, like gospel.
Yeah, make it known. We have when we were in Latin America, we have a lot of concepts around the world, but we need to promote these cultures, this kind of concept that we have here that can help to redefine where things are moving in the world. And we're going to be taking the questions coming from people, but let me ask Gloria this question. Actually, Prof, keep this in mind. I would like you to answer about how nature can shape our culture, our stories, our song, and our education. But before then, I want Gloria to tell us something about we're living so close. Obviously, we live very close to nature. There's a lot of food imported, even fish imported, but we have the capacity to grow things ourselves. I know you've done a lot of work on seeds and agroecology, but how does agriculture impact nature? What is agriculture if it's not connected to nature? What architectural systems align more and protect our environment, our culture? And are we eating our way to extinction, or are we eating a way that is beneficial to us? Gloria, please.
Thank you, Nemo. What I would say here is there are different schools of thought as of how we view agriculture. People view agriculture as a form of green revolution, and there's another school of thought that looks at agriculture from the aspect of agroecology, where we recognize that we have different threats to human beings with multiple impacts on different levels in our society. And we know that agriculture, as we practice it now, is one of the, I am very careful to say this so that I don't shoot myself in my leg. Agriculture as we know it agricultural practices as we know it has been accepted, that we know it has really impacted on nature. So there's always a need for us to learn to balance what we have, because some people talk about improved varieties, GMO seeds against community-based seeds or indigenous seeds, and against productivity, enhanced productivity. So for me, there's a lot of things, there are lots of practices going on, but for me, what is important is for us to look at how we can practice sustainable agriculture, which is more around the agroecology concept, where there's the interdependence, and it promotes a culture of interdependence, where we recognize that climate change is the biggest threat to human beings with multiple impacts on different levels of society, and with agriculture also being part of the root causes, where we have climate change poverty, where so many things are happening because of climate change, poverty, unemployment, migration, lack of food security. And then these are related. So these are major problems that start with a common root cause. So for me, food production, the transformation of agriculture, for me, has to be towards agroecology in order to balance the different practices we're looking at. And it can only work when there's a transformation of consumer attitude in food and other things, and even our health, in looking at the importance of our health, because I know there's been a lot of discussion about the impact of GMOs on our health, and the fact that we need to look at the importance of awareness building and market development, which has to be based on this connectivity, and then to bring in the principle of traceability, to know where the food comes from so that we know what to do and how it's produced. So as far as I'm concerned, agroecology is the answer we need. I'm just jumping the gun now. Agroecology is what we really need to be able to address some of these issues that we are talking about. Recently, I was opportune to go to a farm here in very close to Abuja, where they had plants that were plants that provided shield, or should I say, that act as natural deterrent for pest control, for pests and insects in the farm. Having things like marigold planted against different crops, and having crops that could grow. There was intercropping going on, and we looked at mulching, natural biological compost, and it to help grow the crops they had on that farm. So those are the kind of things I think would happen if we want to be able to balance what we're doing right now. Because if we want to balance the fact that we're trying to push for food security for the nation, looking at that we're over 193 million right now, maybe coming 2050 will be about over 400 million, and we're talking about COVID plus. There's no food, people have not planted, there's the land, the soils are not fertile, the soils are losing fertility and stuff like that. So for me, those are the kind of things I want to look at. So as much as we want to promote, we want to build on productivity and enhance yields, the kind of our practice is very important. The kind of agriculture we practice is very important. So there's a need for us to be able to, I want to use the word balance because it's another school of thought, which is generally gaining ground in the country and all over Africa and in Europe, where we begin to practice agroecology, where we remember that there's a relationship between the different crops and even with the environment and the earth we live. And the earth will readily embrace that which it recognizes, not embrace that which is strange or is alien to it. That's it.
Very well put. Thank you so much. The earth will always embrace that which it recognizes. Well, I think that is big wisdom there. The earth recognizes far more than what you can ever imagine and knows how to reject the things that are harmful to her. So, Prof, I made a comment and a question earlier, and I would like you to address that briefly before Mfonisha will come in with some questions. So, how does nature shape our culture, our stories, our songs, and our education?
Yes, it's an important question to examine. When Gloria was talking about agroecology, I was very interested in following the trend, although I don't have the scientific training to fully absorb it. But to go back to the twin concept of nature and culture, it is nature that defines culture. See, nature is a larger environment or context, and culture are the practices brought into being by humans in an attempt to satisfy their basic needs of survival, in an attempt to reflect their thoughts, either in symbols or in ideas or in beliefs, in an attempt to define certain legal framework, you can call it political system, for governing nature. A village has its own little executive, a kingdom has, a country has, they spell out do's and don'ts. Then from nature, humans also design what we call artistic or aesthetic culture. The culture that gives us a moment to relax, for leisure, for you to break the rules even of culture temporarily, and then exalt yourself spiritually, raise yourself morally during those festivals, numerous of them. Some will be to propitiate, look, nature, we offended you here, take this sacrifice and forgive your children. Some are to commemorate institutions that we have created, maybe kingdoms, memorials. Some are related to the waters, the spirit of the water. Those of us in Niger Delta, these are common. All those masquerade festivals, it is in relation with the spirits of the waters. We imitate them. Some are ancestral. The festival is a moment when you have a national conference with your ancestors. And it happens in Yoruba, they call it a gugu. In Ekpo, it's a gugu. You know, they are spiritual forces. During the festival, they are allowed to come out from their underground chambers and interact with their offspring. Cases are handled. You can find many of them in things fall apart. People have committed sins. That's the time they come up. Please forgive us. We are just human. Please don't do it again. It is even your classmate that may wear that mask. But when he wears the mask, it's no longer your classmate. He's an ancestor, resurrected, incarnated. His authority becomes spiritual authority, and you obey. All these are mechanisms that human beings have created over time in order to contend with challenges of their environment, which means environment is the one that determines culture. But culture is dynamic. As the culture is changing, it is absorbing tendencies and influences from external forces. Your environment has to be strong spiritually and culturally to be able to tame those foreign and external forces. If it's not, my own is so much showing. If your environment is not strong, yes. Hello?
We're hearing you.
If your environment, if your cultural environment is weak, the external influences will overwhelm and overflood it, and you become alienated, which is a common experience of most people in Nigeria now, who have subordinated their souls to some very shallow and artificial interpretation of relationship between us and the environment. To recap, it is the environment that defines cultural practice, that defines the relationship, the mask, the clothes we wear, the food we prepare, the houses we build, They are all defined by the environment. If the place is hot, tropical Swiss, and you build the house with cement and hot objects, you have to buy more air conditioners to cool the place. They are avoidable. If you use clay to build the house, as Demas Nwoko has shown us, artists, he would not need to buy air conditioners. No, we impose costs on ourselves that are completely antagonistic to the environment. So culture and environment and nature are all in the same triangle. When the culture changes, it's reflecting maybe environmental change. But nature is the one that reminds culture, please don't go astray. Follow the line, and the line is balance. Balance is ethical balance. Balance is moral. Don't abuse. Don't alienate somebody else's wife. Even the Bible is there. Laws that will make sure that societies survive and are not plunged into catastrophic conflicts. They are all framed from nature. So if your nature is destroyed, if it is decimated, then your culture is also dying, because nature is one that replenishes culture. That is where I will leave it now.
Thank you so much. You said quite a lot.
We have enough
to dig into these issues further. And I'm sure our participants are having a good time following these discussions. So I'm going to ask Foniso to bring in 1 or 2 questions, and then we'll sum it up.
Okay, thank you, Prof, for this session. Thank you, Ms. Gloria. I mean, it's been very educative, especially with Prof having to tell us about the sanctions and everything. So I'll just read a few questions. I have about 3 questions here, 2 for Prof and then 1 for Ms. Gloria. So Prof, I don't know if you can hear me. I think we lost Prof, so I'll just take the question for Gloria while we wait for Prof. Okay, someone is asking, how can we get the gospel of agroecology that you're talking about down to the grassroots as well as to the people in the rural communities? You know, considering the fact that a lot of people are seeing the whole having to eat canned food and sophisticated food from outside imported foods as really living well. Take for instance, people who purchase things like the sardines and all those what you call beverages and things that are packaged, having those things are being perceived as living a good life. So the question now is, how do we get this message across to people so that we will understand that embracing agroecology for agriculture is what is good for us, is good for our health, and as well as good for nature. Yeah.
Thank you, Foniso, for that question. When you spoke, I smiled because I realized that most probably the person who gave that question lives in the city. Because I know for sure. I recall that I did some work in Ondo, and I was talking to women in agriculture, Ondo State, and I asked them. I said that was when we started talking about what was all those. You know, we always come with different kinds of. When we talk about, I can't remember right now. Well, we're talking about the cost of living that's so expensive now. I said, how are you guys coping with, there was this buzz that came up when Buhari came in about, I've forgotten the word right now, but there was we had issues with funds in the country, and then we're looking at how people would survive. And the woman simply told me, we are not hungry, we have food to eat, and we eat well. We don't eat what you guys eat. Sardine, well, praise God for that. Thank you for that. But they understand the importance. And I think from time, they've always understood, if you go back and look at what people have been doing, then from time before now, there's always been that thing that where we do intercropping. And it's when it was we as moderners, in quotes, when we came up with Green Revolution and trying to build on commercialization, we try to promote monoculture agriculture, monoculturism, because what they have done and what they've been doing, if you go to the farms, they intercrop. They intercrop this with that, plantain and something, legume and this. Even when it comes to things like there was an issue, I think we are talking about the fall armyworm all over Nigeria, and I read in the paper and said, Nigeria needs about something, so many billions, and I was so upset in coming up with that kind of initiative that we need so billions of naira to be able to do that. When I knew that there was a very simple method of addressing the fall armyworm or addressing deterrence in a field, what we simply call the push and pull technology, which is as easy as you plant desmodium, that is oxygen fixers, around just by next to the bed, maybe like corn, maize, and then at the edge of your farm, you plant Napier grass, which acts as a deterrent. These are certain things they all know. But when we come with our modernism, or we come with our so-called agricultural practices, that we come up and we do this. So what we have to do, I rather say, is we should go back to learn from them, because there's so much they have to give us. And I know that there are so many indigenous agricultural practices that have been able to address so many things that we are trying to push. And even working with the kind of seeds they have, indigenous seeds, coming up with community seed farms, seed banks, and stuff like that, we would learn from them. I would encourage him to think of how he's going to learn from them, because that lesson is there for us to pick. We have a lot to learn from them instead of them learning from us. So if you go down there, you find out that, and you ask them, look, how were you doing this before? How did you manage this before? You'll be surprised at the kind of lessons you gain from that. That's what I have to say. So it's already there, but all we have to do is to populate it and expand it and make them understand in the face of the challenges we have, when it comes in environmental challenges we have, how do you address this? And I had said earlier on, nature, the earth will reject what she does not understand. So when we begin to see it from that angle, we don't need to do that. What is sardine? What is, when you go, I just came back from Calabar, I went to the beach. And it was so easy to find all those things from those farmers, and they were so real and they were so nutritious. It's not something that they had to throw gamoline inside the river for them to have a catch. And those are the kind of things we have. So there's a lot we can learn from going back to where we come from. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ma. Your insights that the people from the rural areas will have to go back to the grassroots to be able to learn how and in what way they've been coping before now, and that's good. But now there was other twist to the question is, how do they get the gospel of agroecology now to the rural people who think that living well is eating these things?
Okay, agroecology talks more about interdependent, looks at the principle of interdependencies, and then looking at the principle of intercropping, which is very important, and looking at how we can use very natural deterrents, like you can use marigold, or like there was a farm I saw, they use marigold as a deterrent against some insects. And in another farm I saw that they could use the ashes from pepper, the burnt pepper, the ashes from pepper, or ash. In another farm, it was ash, to address all those things. What I'm trying to say is that agroecology is not a new philosophy. It's something that we already have. And they're not going back to learn, they're not learning something new. It's something they already have that we could build on, and we could push, and we could ask questions. Because what we do when we go to the communities, we just shove ideas at them. This is how we want you to do it. This is how it will work. This is how you pace your farm. You do it like this, you do it like that. And we promote certain things that at the end of the day, their yields don't even really work for them. I don't have answered your question.
Yes, you have. Yes, you have. Thank you very much, ma'am. We had two more questions for Professor Darah. Unfortunately, he is not here. It's a lot of things about sanctions, that 2 questions about sanctions.
He's trying to connect.
Okay, so we'll just hold on. Okay, while he's connecting, maybe I could ask this, Mark. Yes, you said agroecology is not a new concept, which we know, and that you've advised that we need to just build on what has been existing before. But now we are facing a challenge of technology. There's a lot coming in from technology, I mean, encroaching into agriculture. And then, especially with this smart agriculture that being brought or being sold to us, how will we be able to, find a distinction? Yeah, the distinction is there. How do we sell out the distinction to people? How do we let people understand that the whole smart agriculture is actually not to our benefit?
Okay, the issue of education comes to play, but for me, when you think of smart agriculture or agriculture, precision agriculture, it happens for a season, for a bit, but the sustainability is very, very important. It's not there. But when you look at the principle of agroecology, it's something might look slow, but it's sure. And it's something you know that you can embrace. So for me, when you look at, for us to be able to do this, awareness building at all levels is important. Like in my policy commission, I have two thematic groups. One that has to do with seeds and distribution that tries to promote green revolution. And I have another one that is called sustainable land management, where you look at irrigation, you're looking at agroecology, all those principles, and see how you can address sustainable ways in which you can address climate change by promoting climate smart agriculture. So it's one thing for you to take the popular and trash it. It doesn't work like that. So what you simply do, what I'm simply trying to do is I'm trying to populate the space with sustainable land management that I know that works better. Even as I put it, so you just put putting a crooked stick next to a straight stick, and then they see the difference. And even the farmers see that, look, this is more affordable. Affordability comes to play too. Having my own community seed, having a community-based seed farm, a bank, pays better than every time going to buy seeds from different agro dealers. Because, for example, see what happened with us recently with COVID. Many of the farmers could not plant because they did not have access to seeds. But if we had communities that had community seed banks, it's cheaper. It would have been easier for them to go and borrow seeds from there, not grains, seeds from there, plant, and then as they harvest, they do what? They return the seeds they have received, and even with a plus as your own payment, a plus, that is more seeds to the bank. So that's how it works. So it's something that might not happen automatically, but it's something that once we begin, we learn the importance of populating the space with it. People will buy into it. And when people see, and that's where education comes in, awareness comes in, knowledge and generation, dissemination, training centers with demonstration fields, plants, nursery seed banks, and all the works comes into it. And then when people see it work, they will definitely want to embrace it. That's what I think. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, especially for the analogy of putting a straight stick beside a crooked one. The difference is just clear. People will see. Welcome back, Prof. So I have some questions for you, sir.
Yes, go on.
And maybe I'll start with the one immediately responding to something you spoke about sanctions. Somebody's asking that the Christians, taking for instance in Nigeria, believe that some of these sanctions that we had, that we have in some of our villages, because some of them are still on, some of them are evil, and then we should, counsel them and make it way with them. And I mean, someone will not see a reason why you should ban people from entering a particular forest or a particular time. What would you advise? A second question for that from the same person is, how do we create a balance between the sanctions used to oppress a particular gender and what is needed to protect nature? Take, for instance, in where I come from in Ibiono, there is the Ekpo masquerade that forbids females from stepping out in some certain days. I mean, you don't go out, you don't come out from your house, you just stay inside, but the males can go, or maybe the initiated males can step out. And there are other things like in that category that are used to, in a way, oppress some gender, a certain gender over the other. So how do you create a balance between that and the sanctions that are needed to protect nature? That's question 2. And last question for you is, how can the existing policies be strengthened so that can reconnect humans back to nature? How can existing policies in the government be strengthened so that it can help reconnect humans back to nature? So.
Okay, that is a triple bunched questions now. I'll take the first one about sanctions and the attitude of what you may call Christian converts or even Muslim converts. These two are what we may call world religions. That's what they call themselves now, because a majority of the citizens subscribe to those religions in Nigeria. Now, we are talking about nature and survival of the human race, which are more fundamental than those ideologies of Christianity and Islam. This is a very serious debate. Christians and Muslims, whatever religion, those people must integrate their thought into the need for Nigerian society to first survive and thrive. That is the human being there. So the teaching of Christianity or Islam that dismisses all these moral sanctions as paganism is not helpful to Nigeria. Let them know that Israel, the home of this religion, still carries out sanctions. They have festivals. They have tourism in which they take people to the weeping wall, to the grave of Jesus. They have rituals relating to their environment. Christianity must also open itself and update its attitude to new sciences and challenges that are emerging. One place where this integration has taken place is a place like Brazil. Brazil is more Catholic than Italy. It has the largest number of Catholics in the world. But the Black people in Brazil, 100 million of them, they build churches. Instead of calling them St. Paul or St. Stephen, they call them St. Yemoja, St. Ogun, St. Bini. They use African names as saints. A country like Cuba is almost 90% Catholic. But the socialist government of Cuba has employed about 50,000 diviners, Yoruba call it Babalawo, employed by the government and attached to all the hospitals. When an ailment is brought, science gets to its limit, you call the Babalawo. What is the psychic or physiological reason for this ailment? They all work together to produce health for Cuban citizens. If Nigerian Christians constitute themselves to the way that Lugard and Ajayi Crowther defined Christianity 150 years ago, they will be part of the problem. So let all religions relate to the environment and integrate positive conduct and behaviors that can safeguard the environment. If we are not surviving in Nigeria, Christianity and Islam will not be here. And in an earlier intervention, I referred to India and China. The two of them constitute half of the human beings on earth. They maintain their relationship with their environment and their nature. And India satellites are going up now. They are going to Mars. They are going to Venus. Their society has not stopped developing because they relate to their environment. So Christianity that calls those sanctions hidden or pagan, that Christianity is not useful for Nigeria's development and modernization. That is my answer to that first part. As for the gender discrimination, it's quite rampant. It's rampant in what you call folklore and folk traditions, because apparently this system of male chauvinism has been entrenched in Nigeria for a long time. And you take very serious-minded, orderly re-education to bring gender balance. In many of those masquerades and practices that require esoteric language, like divination, the males dominate because they're also lucrative. They make money from it. When it comes to the wearing masks and coming out from grove to demonstrate and so on, well, the male slut is not a woman affair. So a process of cultural democratization will take place. Because even in these societies, rural societies, females have their own particular festivals, their own particular rites of passage. I belong to a part of Urobo where women will not get married until they have undergone a rites of passage ceremony called bridal pageant. All the young girls at 18 or so will come to the street dressed in their best dress and parade their beauty, and they will be clapped for, songs sung in their praise like kings and queens before they go to their husbands. That thing is done, we call it emeteyamo, is done to warn the husband that this person you're marrying is not a pauper. She's a queen. Don't mistreat her. If you look at the home she's going to return to. Those ceremonies are very important in inducting both the girl to have self-confidence that she has a family that is solid, and for the husband and family to beware that this one coming is not a slave, and we will return her home if you dare. So sanctions are very useful. They are not like this nonsense we do in the courts of putting a ring in the hand. Then the man goes to go to a bar to drink. When he comes back, he throws the ring at you and not going to marry you again. You can't do it in traditional African society. you will be summoned to a community court and you pay a fine. If there are children in marriage, they will impose a fine of every month. You submit such amount to feed the children. Those societies are more orderly. They are more law-abiding. And thanks to our knowledge of Afrocentric culture, Christianity and Islam have not matched the discipline of those cultures. They have not. 10 commandments cannot hold this country down, because the people who preach 10 commandments are robbing in the banks. They are collaborating with politicians to defraud nations. If you did it in the traditional culture, you will vanish, you will die. So sanctions are crucial. When the Chinese want to do sanctions, a small child is guilty of a crime, they ask the parents to buy the bullet for killing the child. That is sanction. So we need sanctions. Let our Christian and Muslim brothers upgrade their philosophy and join in the advocacy for culture and nature to become partners in the challenging business of sustainable development. Human beings, if they are not around, all religions will collapse. And this is we are discussing on this platform is how to give priority to the survival of nature and man, of human beings first. Then they will go and practice religion. Let religions rise up and meet us at this level of scientific discussion.
Well,
Okay,
thank you.
Prof. Thank you.
For this, I think that was the last question. So thank you so much for bringing that up. Prof, your comment on religion and culture is it's very interesting. It's very interesting, but I would say also sometimes the problem is not with Christianity. The problem is actually the interpretation of certain scriptures, because and the ways. There are very many Christian movements that are completely working for sustenance of.
There are environment movements, I know, especially in Latin America. Yes.
Exactly. Yes, and also, well, you say especially, yes, we have also in Africa. But thank you. It's been a very, very interesting conversation. I wish we could go on the whole day,
Yes.
but we'll pack it here and come back another day. I'm just going to give you 1 minute for final
new branches are developed that we must follow up.
Yes, we are taking copious notes. All this conversation will be transcribed because we have to learn more from it. And we're going to have these videos edited and also posted online. So those who are not able to join us now can always go back to it. And of course, it's being streamed live on Facebook. So that will already be there in the form that we're having this conversation. So before I come back to you, Prof, for your thoughts, final thoughts for this conversation, I want to ask Gloria, how would you just sum up what has happened today? Do you have maybe you got some light bulbs popping up above your head, not on your head, and you just want to make one sentence to round up this meeting?
Thank you, Nemo. It's really been a very interesting dialogue because I've learned a lot just listening to Prof also. And one thing I'll like to reiterate is the fact that we are part of nature and we are not apart from nature. And that knowing this will help us build a system that is truly resilient. And we should not forget that we have a stake in what happens in the planet because we have only one Earth. And I go back to the proverb I started with. I said, whosoever burns his father's house inherits only ashes. And so it's very important. So we have to take care of what we have, and our practice has to be sustainable. If you don't know, learn. There are lots of opportunities. There's a lot of knowledge out there, and there are lots of people who are doing what I think you should want to do to help us build a sustainable livelihood. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Gloria. We're really very, very happy to have had you on this. But thank you for your contributions. And Prof.
Yes.
Could you give us your thoughts as we round up this conversation?
Yes, gladly. I have learned many things that I took for granted, and I've absorbed new perspectives that are very useful for my own living as well as my own academic engagements. I want you and Ms. Ekpo to follow up on that alternative energy thing that she broached. She didn't have time to develop it, but she went to Kenya and saw solar panels on top of roofs. It is possible here, Nimo. Once that becomes a program of NDDC or whatever organization you have in Niger Delta here, the forest will rest. So, and gas can be piped to the houses in the villages. It can be piped. The science is already available. From your Nordish experience, natural gas can be piped to all the villages. If government does that in 10 years, our tropical forest will be restored. And they are inexpensive. Also, the question that we should work hard to produce curriculum or portfolio of knowledge to guide the recovery of our society largely from its ignorance and arrogance, and so that we can make knowledge respectable and bring pride to our people that all those who work on earth, who plant, who harvest, who labor are friends of the earth. They have knowledge to give because their encounter with the earth daily give them knowledge. Let us tap that knowledge. Let us also live with them, learn with them, and create a new society of awareness, which I think is the key now. With the awareness spread, 200 million Nigerians knowledgeable in how to preserve and respect the earth. The rest of the continent of Africa would be glad that they have a leadership. And you know, even in the world, Nigeria has a voice. If our writers like you, our artists, musicians, Nollywood people, everybody is pumping this knowledge through aesthetic, pleasurable means, and a new society is created. The balance and friendship and harmony between nature, humans, and culture will be restored in a short time. I will be glad we did. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Gigi, Darah. Thank you so much, Gloria, Ekpo. It's been a very exciting time, and we've all learned a lot collectively. And it's our belief that through this conversation, this dialogue, we have actually been challenged to have true dialogue rather than destructive and hostile monologues with nature. We've also learned that the different forms of energy, we don't have to be stuck in the barrel of the oil forever. We need to look at things, ways of generating energy that's more conducive to our environment. And in fact, we need to redefine energy. When a man or a woman enters a room, the energy situation changes. So what is that? It's not only the one that moves things or lights things, that the one that challenges us to be better people. So that's also a form of energy we have that we believe we should not forget. We are hoping that this dialogue has succeeded in showing that we are part of nature and that there are other beings, the other beings on earth and above the earth that are literally our relatives. We are all connected. We depend on each other. This very high level of interdependency in nature. And so we're asking ourselves and want to challenge ourselves, what can we do differently? What forms of energy production and what kind of consumption will serve us better? What does it mean to live well? We've talked about there are different pathways. Our ancestors, our forebears, they had very clear measures of living well and about defining wellness in physical terms, in emotional terms, in ethical terms, in spiritual terms. What dimensions are we still keeping in view? We mentioned Ubuntu, we mentioned Harambe, we mentioned Etu, we mentioned Agbaro, which I never knew about until today. So I would always talk about Agbaro as a very good concept, very critical concept in the Niger Delta that helps us to build a system of dialogue with nature and, of course, living in harmony with one another. Because if we don't live in harmony with nature, there's no way we can live in harmony with other human beings. It's all. So thank you so much for all of us who joined the event. Please come back when we announce the next one, and do go back to Facebook to watch this video from the beginning all over again. We'll also be posting it on YouTube in the days to come. And we're going to transcribe this conversation for use in a way that you can actually hold in your hand physically, because this has been very, thank you so much, Professor Darah, and thank you so much, Gloria Ekpo. We appreciate you all. Thank you, everybody. Till next time.
Thank you.